Hey, welcome to today's lesson. We're talking about 4.7, which is mass and capacity. That's metric units of measurement for basically weight and volume is kind of what we're talking about. I know you've talked a little bit about metric units in Mr. Volk's classroom, and we're going to reference that a little bit. So if you can think back to what he taught you and add it to what I'm going to teach you, you should be in good shape. So we're going to start out talking about mass. Mass is really how much something weighs. It's a little bit different because it's talking about how much matter is in it, but in the grand scheme of things, you're thinking about how heavy something is. And whenever we're talking about mass, we're going to talk about grams, and we'll use those same prefixes that Mr. Volk talked about, milli and kilo, but it's always a gram. Whenever you see gram, you know it's talking about how heavy something is. So our main ones that we're going to use today are milligram, gram, and kilogram. So let's get started thinking about this. We need to have some kind of frame of reference in order to help us to decide how to use each measurement. So if we wanted to use milligrams, we need to think about how heavy is just a grain of sugar, or a grain of sand is the other one I want you to think about. So if you'd want to count it out in grains of sand or grains of sugar, then that's when you would want to use milligrams. You're obviously going to use that for something really, really, really light. When we want to think about medium kind of things, we're going to talk about the regular gram, just plain old gram. And with that, I want you to think about a paper clip. How heavy is a paper clip? It's certainly a little heavier than a grain of sand is, but it still doesn't have a ton of weight to it. Another thing you can think about, if you don't think of a paper clip, you can think of a thumbtack. So just those little push pins that you use to hang up a poster or something like that. So if you would want to measure something counting out however many thumbtacks or however many paper clips, then you're going to want to use the gram. If you're talking kilograms, this is what we would use for heavier items. A kilogram is about the same heaviness as a book. So think of your math textbook and think about, would you want to weigh something using math textbooks? That's obviously something a little heavier. Another thing to think about if a textbook doesn't work for you, like a frying pan, so what you would use to cook on the stove with at home, is another thing that you could kind of reference mentally when you're thinking about how heavy things are. So let's talk about how we would use it. In your homework, you're going to have things like this where it gives you a mass, and then you have to figure out, is it a dog or a pencil? If we have something we know it weighs, or it has a mass of 10.3 kilograms, is it more likely that it's a dog, or is it more likely that it's a pencil? Well, if we think back to our first slide, we said that kilograms were like a book. So if I had a little over 10 books, is it more likely that it's going to be a dog or a pencil? That'd be a pretty heavy pencil. I'm guessing that this is going to be a dog. So 10 textbooks equals a dog, probably a smaller, medium-sized dog. It's certainly not a big old Great Dane or something like that, but it would be a dog. So that's how I want you to think about things. If I had 10 textbooks, is that about the same as a pencil, or would that be more like a dog? So when we're talking about capacity, this is like talking about volume, how much a container can hold. And whenever we're talking about capacity, then we use the unit of a liter. And again, we're using the same milli and kilo, milliliter and kiloliter for our main ones that we're going to use. And so let's get started with that. If we have just a teeny tiny amount and we want to use an eyedropper, so like medicine when you were a baby and you had to get it out of an eyedropper, that was in milliliters. Another thing to think about with a milliliter would be 2 drops of rain, maybe. 2 drops of rain or drops of water. We could also have a liter, which is about the capacity of a large bottle of water. You see people carrying around water bottles all the time. That's similar to a liter. Or we might say similar to a paint can would be another reference. And then we have the kiloliter. This is for larger amounts. That's about the capacity of 5 bathtubs, which is a lot of water if you think about it. Or you could say 1 hot tub. We've all probably sat in a, whoops, I gotta learn how to spell hot tub. That's what that's supposed to spell. So a hot tub. So when you think about things. If you were going to measure a bucket, would you want to fill it with a eyedropper? Would you want to fill it with a water bottle, or would you want to fill it with 5 bathtubs? I think it's pretty safe to say we would want to use the water bottle, which means we'd be using liters. If we wanted to fill a teaspoon, so that's the spoon that you eat with, that you probably have with your morning cereal or whatever. If you were going to fill it, would you fill it with an eyedropper? Would you fill it with a water bottle? Or would you fill it with 5 bathtubs? Again, a bathtub's going to spill way over the edge. A water bottle's going to spill way over the edge. You want to use a water bottle. So we're talking about a milliliter here. If we go down here, if we choose an appropriate measure unit to measure an item, if I wanted to know how heavy an eraser was, think about like a pink bar eraser here. And if I want to measure how heavy that is, I'm probably not going to want to use grains of sand. I'm probably going to want to use a paper clip. And so with that, I'm going to use grams. Boy, people are knocking at my door. They can't wait to get in here for this lesson. That's all right. And if I want to know how much a bottle of nail polish will hold, I'm thinking in terms of capacity. So kiloliter, liter, or milliliter. Do I want to use bathtubs, water bottles, or eyedroppers? I'm thinking for nail polish, I want to use eyedroppers. So I'm going to use milliliters for that as well. All right, so let's keep moving on here. This is what I want you to remember. This is our biggest key slide here for the day. I want you to make sure you write this down, that our standard units of length are for length, we would use meters when we're talking metric. If we're talking mass, we always want to use grams. And whenever we're talking capacity, we need to make sure we switch it to liters. So I need you to write down this slide, because this is what you're going to need to remember. So with that, let's keep moving on. And here's where we need, I know, Mr. Volk to come back into things. With him, we had, he taught us earlier in the school year, kangaroos hopping down mountains drinking chocolate milk. And it's the same thing in math. We use the exact same thing, except instead of mountains, sometimes we're going to, when we're using length, we would use the M for mountains, for meters. But when we want to use capacity, we need to switch it to liters. And when we want to use mass, we need to switch it to grams. So we're going to use this, and I know Mr. Volk likes to do it, he likes to write it vertically. For math purposes, I like to write it horizontally like this, because then we can see which direction we're going. If we're going from the liters to milliliters, we would be going to the right, which is the same how we're going to move our decimal. Or if we're going from liters to kiloliters, we'd be moving to the left, which is how we want to move our decimal. So I like to write it horizontally. So let's look down here. Here are the steps that we're going to need to know in order to convert using metric systems. The first thing you need to do is find out where you're starting. So if you're switching from grams to milligrams, you're starting here at grams. Where are we going to end? I said to milligrams over here. That's where we would end. So now I need to count the number of whoops. That's just my little whoop, whoop, whoop. So to switch from grams to milligrams, we would go 3 whoops to the right. So that's exactly what I would do with my decimal point. I would have to move it 3 place values to the right. So let's go ahead and practice that. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to tell you to do this on your homework, your quizzes, whatever you're doing when you're converting metric units, is I want you to write that down, the kangaroos hopping down mountains, or we could have our liters or our grams. And then we have drinking chocolate milk. Okay, so this is where we switch out M for meters, L for liters, or G for grams. So if I want to go from 10 liters and find out how many milliliters that would be equal to, the first thing I'm going to want to do here, I'm going to switch my color, is step 1 from the last slide. If we look back here, step 1 says find where you start. So I'm starting at liters. I'm starting right here is where I'm starting. And Step 2 is, where do I want to end? I want to end here at milliliters. So what's it going to take to get there? It's going to take 1, 2, 3 hops, 3 whoops to the right. That's what I need to do with my decimal now. Right now I have 10 with a decimal point after because it's a whole number. So I need to go 1, 2, 3 to the right, and I need to fill those in like they're little egg cartons. So 10 liters is the same thing as 10,000 milliliters. So let's try it again. Here I have kilograms and I want to go to grams. So this time I'm over here and I want to end up here. So again, I go 1, 2, 3 to the right to get there. So I'm going to do the same thing with my decimal point. Right now it's afterwards, so I go 1, 2, 3 to get there now. So 8 kilograms is the same thing as having 8,000 grams. So let's try this one. 7,000 liters, how many kiloliters? What's my first step? Aha! I need to find out, where am I starting? I'm starting here at the liters. This time we need to follow the blue line. And I want to end up here at the kiloliters. So now, how do I get from here to here? I go 1, 2, 3 whoops. This time I went to the left. So I'm going to take my 7,000, here would be my decimal point here, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 to the left. So 7,000 liters is the same thing as 7 kiloliters, or 7.0 kiloliters. So we could have it as 7, or you could have left it as 7.0. That would be just fine. So the last one we're going to try together, we have 100 milligrams and we're going to kilograms. So let's switch it over to green, and we start here. We're going to start here, and we're going to go all the way to kilograms. So we're going to go way over here. Wow, this is going to be a lot of whoops. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whoops that I did to the left. So if I'm going to take my, I'm going to put it out here because I'm going to need a little more space. Right now I've got 100, and it's a whole number, so my decimal's here. I need to go 1, whoops, 1, 2 to get around the other 0, 3 to get around the 1, 4, 5, 6. So now I need to fill these in. So I went from 100 milligrams to having 0.0001, because remember, 0 is at the end of a decimal, don't do anything. So 0.0001 kilograms. Woo! That was a big one. So now I got 4 that I would like you to try, and we'll talk about them in class tomorrow and do a little refresher on how to convert in the metric system. Have a great night, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow.